Hello, everyone, and welcome to Decararison's first virtual webinar series called Let's Talk About Racism. So, just to get started, for those of you who don't know, my name is Jordan Rose, and I'm in my third year of the BTM program. For those of you who don't know the program, it's Business Technology Management, and I'm currently on the Decarison executive team. But before I continue on, I would like to take this moment to acknowledge the land that Ryerson currently occupies. Toronto is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee people that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited to this treaty in spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. So, some of you might be wondering, how did this webinar series come about? So, I'm going to mention the obvious. So, following the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, people of Louisville were very outraged with the fact that after countless examples and scenarios of police brutality taking the lives of innocent Black people, that nothing has been done. And the same thing continues to happen over and over and over again. So for myself, when I found out about this, I personally was just torn up about it. And it really just made me sick to my stomach because after years and years and years of countless efforts to make that change, I found that there's still the same problems happening. Innocent Black lives are still being taken. And I'm not saying that in the sense that I fear that I may be the next Black life that may be taken, but for me, the way I see it is if you're taking one person's Black life and basically just saying that it doesn't matter by doing so, and for those who are not are trying to justify the police brutality taking place, then I feel that's an attack to me personally. So in the midst of all of that, I was trying to do what I personally thought was the best decision in the moment. And that would be making the donations, protesting, hanging up posters in my neighborhood to make sure that when I walk in my neighborhood, I know that Black Lives Matter is being promoted and that there's a lot of awareness being brought to it because I I know that in my neighborhood specifically, there's a bit of a disconnect. So I'm not saying that it's a racist neighborhood. However, I know that it's not somewhere where a movement like this could really gain that much momentum. So I felt that since I hadn't seen anything in my neighborhood about it, my friend and we decided to just hang up some posters. And I felt like there's still something more that I could be doing. But in the midst of this, Nicholas, who is the president of Zacharias, and he reached out to me to see how I was doing, given what was happening, and just to kind of see where my mind state was at. And at first, I, I answered and I explained to him exactly what I just said to you guys. And at first, I didn't even think of having a webinar. I didn't think that we'd be able to put something together like this that you guys would all be able to attend. And sure enough, the idea came up when we were on the phone. And while I was talking to Nicholas on the phone and just kind of giving him a background of like my experiences growing up with racism and how I feel about everything that was happening, it kind of triggered me because in doing that, I had to unfortunately remember like I guess the first couple of examples of microaggressions that I faced. So growing up, my parents made it very clear to me that being a Black person and better yet being a Black man, just in general, that I would be judged by the color of my skin. So they made it very obvious through telling me stories that they've experienced personally with racism or experiences that they've seen in the news, making me watch all the installments of Roots, which is a movie about slavery and so forth. So they did everything that they possibly could to make sure that I was aware and that I wouldn't go out into this world kind of ignorant to what could come my way. And sure enough, growing up, like there's just there's just certain things that I didn't really think of it as like as big as it was. I kind of brushed a lot of things off to the side and just tried to take it to the chin and just kind of move along. And now looking back, I realized that these are the very things that still happen today, and I'm still affected by it. So to give you guys an example, uh, many of you may not know this, but I do wear hearing aids because I'm hard of hearing, and I'm not deaf. I'm just hard of hearing. So a lot of people kind of get that mixed up. And I remember that my grades were really, really, really bad in grade three because I couldn't hear the teacher, and at the same time, I didn't have a good relationship with my teacher because I was intimidated by him, and I just felt stupid for like not being able to hear, and I just never spoke up and said, "Hey, I can't hear you. Can you repeat that?" And then that's when I had a meeting with my principal. Same thing. I was just scared of the fact that I have to meet with the principal to talk about this, and I was a little uncomfortable, and I couldn't really hear her. And then at the end of the day, when my parents were coming to pick me up, they had to speak with her as well, and she was essentially trying to tell them that yeah, like she's basically deaf, like like he needs a hearing aid. And my parents took offense to that because the reality is I'm not deaf, I'm just hard of hearing. So my mom responded with, unless you're a certified audiologist, I don't think you have the right to kind of like write him off as deaf because that's not the case. So I'd appreciate it if you don't talk about him like that because that's disrespectful to me. And at that point, that's when my home teacher was walking in, and then because it's I don't know because my mom just called that one thing out, and my dad was there too. I don't know what possessed him to do this, but he walked into the room and he was just like, "Whoa, don't go blazing your gun." So when I heard that afterwards, because my parents, I wasn't in the room, like your parents told me that, I was kind of like what does he mean by that? And then now that I'm older and I have to actually like think about that situation again, I realized that that was one of the earlier um, memories that I've had of experiencing regressions and personally, but my parents. Hello, can everyone hear me now? Yeah. Yeah, my Wi-Fi is shaking it right now. Wait, wait, is it good now, or is it still?
Yeah, you're good, Jordan.
Okay, 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 cool. All right. So where was I? So for those of you who don't know what a microaggression is a statement, action, incident regarded as an instance of indirect discrimination against members of a marginalized groups, such as an ethnic minority. So before I start explaining examples, I want to ask everyone a question. So, question, I just want you guys to know or the chat. So, have you sorry, it's saying my internet connection's unstable. Am I good? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna assume that's a yes. So the first question is, have you faced any microaggressions? Yeah. All right. Feel free to just put your response in the chat, answering yes or no. Okay. So the next question is: do you know anyone who's personally been affected by microaggressions? Okay, okay. Let's see everyone's response. Okay, so now since everybody has been saying yes, is anybody feel comfortable turning on their camera or not, or just kind of giving an example before I start to explain my example?
Hey Jordan. Hey, it's Daniel. Um, and I wanted,
Hey, Danielle.
yeah, I wanted to share my experience going
Mm-hmm.
through microaggressions. So I've been actually like remembering most of them during this like the past 2 months. Um, and some of them are from like school, especially middle school. Say I was probably like in grade 7 or 8, and it
Mm-hmm.
was a time when like people would make jokes, and there was a lot of jokes that you could say that they were making at the time that would not fly today, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the time I didn't really know like what was wrong and what was like, what was like out of line and what was okay, so this one person, he says to me, I think he said something about something to do with my facial features, so like my lips,
Mm-hmm.
or like you talk about my hair. That's one of them. I've always gotten comments about my hair, saying like, "Oh, it's nappy," or like you need to comb it, something like that. Like, why is your hair like that? And it's like, it's one of those moments that you kind of don't want to deal with, so you don't say anything. Like you don't think it's a big deal until much later. You're like, that was kind of offensive. Like even touching my hair. Like that's not cool. With black people, like we don't like when people touch our
Mm-hmm.
hair. But it's those are like some minor ones. More recently, like I thought about someone who said the N-word to me, and I never really like called him out for it, you know? And it wasn't until recently that I was like, you know what? I can't be talking to you no more because you still say that word and you don't find anything wrong with that word. So yeah, stuff like that. Like it's been a bunch of different experiences I've been like having flashbacks on. And it's not the best feeling to remember a microaggression that was said to you, because it's like that wasn't right now, but you have a feeling that you could have said more than just, "Oh, can you not say that?" And it's
Mm-hmm.
like that's just like the feelings I've been having, more recently. You know, but yeah, that's my experience. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Okay.
Daniel,
Yeah.
you remember what happened in first year, first semester with our group
Yeah.
member?
That's actually why I
Yeah.
hopped on this. Jordan and I, we were taking a class together, um, and we were on a group assignment. We had a group project, and I'm not sure if we're talking about the same experience, but there was one of our group members used to use that word frequently, the N word, and it was like we had a little group chat, to get work done. So yeah, I remember that. That was one of just first year.
Yeah. And then her trying to justify that. And then at the same
Mhm.
time, when that happened, we were so far into the semester. I swear it was like in November or December.
Yeah.
And she knew that it was outright wrong, and then tried to flip it on us as if we're being extra. But we kind of just had to deflate the situation and just like stare at peace and say that's wrong. And after that, like the I guess like the vibes in the group is kind of off from there because it's kind of awkward just working with
Exactly.
someone,
Yeah.
and like at the so, and it's just way too late to switch. But yeah, so this is my internet is good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're good. You're
So this is exactly why this is exactly why I wanted to have this discussion because I'm glad that you jumped in to talk because not a lot of people know about that situation, and this is what I mean by things will happen and you kind of just we feel like we have to essentially not to say sweep it under the rug,
yeah.
but
Like,
kind of just let it just like deal with it, but
yeah.
then kind of just let it go away because that's all we feel like we can do. So I just want to get into some more examples of microaggression. So uh, one that I personally get a lot is with my height. So I'm 6'4", quite often when people meet me for the first time, they're first, oh, you for the Raptors or you play ball or whatever, right? I don't. So if any of you are thinking that, I don't. So when I do say that, I usually just follow up with what I'm doing in school because that's pretty much like the next best thing I got. And then I noticed that that's when the conversation starts to die out and people start to lose interest. And there's one specific time where I was at an event and I was with someone else who was not black and just as tall as me, and they asked me that question, but then didn't ask the other guy that question. And then I was kind of just thinking of it as like, like I expected that, but I didn't expect to kind of see it all pan out just like that. And then another thing that I've personally seen and that I've heard some of my black female friends tell me about is when they get their hair done, then all of a sudden now people want to say, "Can I touch your hair?" Like for one, black women are not a petting zoo for you to just come up to them and touch their hair. So in those situations, they're put in a weird predicament because now, like if it's in a workplace setting, like you can't like what do you like if you feel like you kind of have to let it happen or like it's just things weird. What are you supposed to say? Like that is a weird question to ask. And then one thing that I've heard and that also they've told me about as well is getting that you're pretty for a black girl. Like what does that mean? Like, so is it because like I'm the one black person or that one black girl that you're comfortable with and that you took a liking to, and then now they're pretty, now you can view them as that, or what is that? And that's almost a backhanded compliment if you ask me. And then at the same time, I know a lot of black women who are outspoken and would like to speak up on these micro assaults or micro insults that they're getting. They're now casted, uh, or just angry. And for what? Like because you spoke up for yourself? No, and I think that's wrong. And then another example is some people would say that I sound white. I don't know how you could sound like a color. And what I really think they mean is that I'm articulate. But does being black mean I'm no longer articulate? No, it doesn't. So when people say that, it's kind of an insult to my intelligence, and I just don't appreciate it. And I'm sure any other black person who has like heard this or had that said to them could say the exact same thing. And then if you were to call it out and then try to say, hey, like what you did was wrong or what you said was wrong, then people will who are sending out these micro assaults or insults will then say, oh, it was just a joke, or I don't see color, or all my friends are black or something like that, so I'm not racist. And to me, that that doesn't justify the joke because it's not funny, period. So when people say that and they try to cover up a joke with I have a lot of black peers, or I like, I just don't see it that way, or I didn't mean it like that. To me, I think it's still wrong, because you should think before you say things. So another thing, and another example that I brought up, or was that when I'm walking into stores, it doesn't happen that frequently, but sometimes like I'll see people, clutch onto their purse a little bit tighter, or even just in my home, I, uh, you know, just walk home, and it was just a bad day. So I didn't want to go inside my house because I was crying. I didn't want my enemy to ask me, running around my front yard, because I knew that like nobody would just come out and see me there. And then finally, I just went inside just to put my bag down quickly, and I was just gonna start walking to the Tim Hortons. And then I seen a cop car, and I was just like, okay, that's when my heart stopped, because I kind of went into defense mode. But then I was like, wait a minute, I don't do anything. But for some reason, I just had a really bad gut feeling that like the cop for some reason was gonna say something to me. And sure enough, he did. And he's like, hey, like, have you seen anyone or lingering around, or trespassing? Sorry, that's what he said. Trespassing in a blue jacket. So that was me. I was the person in the blue jacket just walking around on my front yard. But I don't know who called the police, but someone on the street called the police. And now looking back at it, I just think, like, I can't believe that, someone would do that. And I didn't think much of it in the moment, because like what was happening that day was just like, that was like taking up my mind. And I didn't think of it as anything. I was kind of just like scared. I was like, what, like, okay. And like, what is that? What is that supposed, like, what am I supposed to do now? Because the police officer, I said, no, like that. I mean, I was in the blue jacket, but that's my house. And then he's like, oh, okay. And it was just an awkward interaction. So essentially, what I'm trying to get to, and why I had Daniel join us to share his experience, is to really just give you guys an insider of how microaggressions make us feel. And they make us feel uncomfortable, and it diminishes our self-confidence. And, to add to that, when people bring up the example again, when people say that I sound white, it's kind of like a hit to my intelligence and my confidence, because it just makes me feel as if I'm not, like, just because of the color of my skin, I'm not given that same credit, or automatically it's like I'm trying to be another race that I'm not. But I feel that it's wrong, because you could still be Black and articulate at the same time. And at the same time, it leaves us confused. And sometimes these microaggressions can also leave us angry. So in these moments, I find that there is not to say a fear of speaking up, but then when you do speak up, then like it just feels like, sometimes like people may not receive it. Oh, sorry, let me just read this comment. For me, it's almost like you don't feel good enough to speak. Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So yeah, so I find that, especially when you feel like you are being tokenized, and for those of you who don't know what tokenism is, it is essentially just recruiting a small number of people from a specific ethnic group just to basically check off the diversity box. And quite often, based in the neighborhood I live in, and the environments that I'm in, I typically end up being the only Black person, or one of the few, or a handful of Black people. And I find that in those situations, it's like, it's not that comfortable to speak up, because at the same time, not everybody may be as empathetic. And I feel that, it may just end up being a slap in the face, speaking up, and then kind of getting an objection towards it. So I feel like as if it's kind of hard to really just always call these things out if the other person who's sending these assaults out or insults out is not ready to be empathetic and understanding why what they're saying is wrong or why what they're doing is wrong and so forth. So I found that I have been tokenized through um, just because, just by default, because of the environments and the situations that I'm in. And I always felt that if I continuously strive to be better than the stereotype put out for Black males, that I would slowly be able to kind of knock down those negative stereotypes that were put onto us. And I'm not gonna lie, I have come across people who say, "Whoa, like, I didn't think you were gonna be like this or whatever. You showed me that, like, Black people are, not all that bad." And I'm just like, well, okay, yeah, that's good, but also you just you have a problem because you're essentially admitting the fact that you're racist by telling me that. And those people I'm no longer in contact with. But it's just, I find that, in me making ample effort to beat the stereotype and try to change the narrative for like Black people as a whole, for which any other race that I come in contact with, I feel that is not enough anymore. And I feel that my actions or how I present myself can only do so much. And I feel that a discussion like this is very necessary, because then now having people from different backgrounds and there's various environments and demographics, everyone can kind of take something away from this and learn, and essentially spread the knowledge and slowly eradicate it bit by bit, case by case, when you come in contact with it. So before I hand it off to our guest, Jeff, I would like to share a story, and this one is from middle school. So in grade 7, I was asked, or like the teacher asked us to pick a topic and to write a speech. So I had decided to write my speech on racial profiling on Black males, because a couple months prior to that, I had already been racially profiled by, I think it was a security guard in Zara in Yorkdale Mall. And it was my mother and I, and we were being followed for no reason. And I felt really passionate about it. And I was like, I'm just going to do the speech on this. And I had an example of a news reporter who was in city news. And I was like, great, like I could put this together. So an example of someone who has a following and an example of my own. And, I was really passionate about it. And then when I showed it to my teacher for him to review it and give me some feedback, I was just expecting comments on my grammar and my punctuation and so forth. But he pretty much said to me, he's like, this is good, but not everyone in the class is Black. So, why don't you talk about how people are, racially profiled at the airports, or, or about how, just like he started listing other examples of other stereotypes or racially charged motives towards other races. And I didn't really know what to say, because back then I wasn't as outspoken as I am now. And I was pretty shy. So I kind of just said, oh, okay, I guess like I can make that change. But I knew within myself I didn't want to make that change, because like it just didn't sit right with me. And I brought it home to my parents and I explained to them what happened. And then I was just like, like I have to change it. And I was gonna change it more so to make sure that my grade isn't hurting because of it. And my parents said to me, they're like, if you're passionate about it, which we know you are, this is something that needs to be talked about. You can't speak for everyone right now if this is what your focus is on. So despite what he says, still do it. And my parents gave me the support that I needed and the confidence that I needed to still go ahead and do it the way how I wanted to. And now looking back at it, some of you may realize that's kind of like Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. So he kind of hit me with the All Lives Matter thing by saying that. And was being really angry, and like it just my relationship with him, it still seemed okay, but I just lost all respect for him because I felt that he did not situation. And I also believe that we all play a part, despite our racial background, in eradicating racism on a whole, and not just within the Black community, but just across the board as a whole. So, because we're almost running out of some time here, I would like to now invite Jeff Keller to come on and share his piece.
Great, thanks, Jordan. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Just checking.
Jeff, yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me this evening. It's an honor to talk to you guys and spend a little bit of time with you. I met Jordan late last fall at a Black Talent Pipeline event that we held at the bank, and he reached out to me, and I absolutely jumped at the opportunity to chat with you guys because I think the narrative right now demands it. It's something that I've been passionate about for a long, long time. Jordan's heard some of the stories that I've told at the event that night. I was the keynote speaker, and it's something that I've lived with my whole life and am very passionate about. I grew up in a very diverse family, and I think it just came natural to me. But the more, as I grew up and the more I saw how pervasive an issue was out there, it made me want to do something more throughout my whole life. And the one thing that I always knew was, I can never say I sympathize or know what it's like to live in a Black person's shoes, because I can't. I will never know what that means, but I can certainly help move that agenda along, and that's kind of what I've been doing my whole life. It's been a lifelong journey for me around a number of different things around diversity and inclusion, and not just visible minorities. It's around the people with disabilities, and that started at a very, very early age for me when a kid moved in across the street from me when I was probably about 12 years old, and he had cerebral palsy. He couldn't talk. He was confined to a wheelchair. But for one reason or another, he and I hit it off and became really good friends. And through the years, I learned an awful lot from him that I could never repay him for, on how to be inclusive and how to be tolerant and stand up for what you believe in, because there were always the people that would make fun of him or do whatever, whatever. And I stood up for him. He was one of my closest friends, and he taught me a lot about life and how to treat people equally and fairly. And it stayed with me my whole life. But when I think about where we're at this point in time in our society, it's on one hand it just makes me shake my head and feel a little bit sad about it, because we're still having this discussion all these years later. I've seen it through the Rodney King trials and tribulations in the early 90s. I've seen it in the early 2000s, and every time I see one of these big events come up, I keep telling myself, now's the time. Now we're going to see this change, and then you continue to see all these things, these incidents that happen, particularly with the police brutality side of it. Listen, I also come from a law enforcement family, and I understand both sides of that equation. Oops, I think my video dropped there a second. Okay, looks like I'm back. So I do understand both sides of the equation of what it means, and just like you see with anything, there's, not all cops are bad, and not all Black people are bad. It's the problem is that people stereotype and get caught in the middle of that, and everyone runs their own agenda, and it's not a good place to be. But I've been involved with a number of the events that the bank has around what we call BAN. That's our Black Employee Initiative, and I want to see this agenda move ahead. I want to see opportunities for folks of all different races and all different abilities get these opportunities that have traditionally been usually seated with white males like me. I shared a story with these guys, and was recruited a while back from a large bank in the U.S. who wanted me to come in for a chief audit executive job, and flattered. I talked to them. I looked around at the senior management team, and I see nothing but mirror images of me. And I see a board that's made up of mirror images of me. And I said to myself, I don't care what kind of money they're paying or, what title it gets. That's not where I want to be. I work for an organization that I'm very proud of, that is very, very diverse in its approach, doing everything it can to help move the needle on that space. And I I just those types of things still get under my skin today, because my goal is to make sure that before I leave this earth, that I have an opportunity to say I helped make a change, and I have a long way to go in that space. I got involved in it with our D&I group many years ago, and do a lot of those events. But to me, it's not just about the events. We've got to see that turn into measurable metrics. I've got to see. Are you guys? So I'm getting some notes here that you guys can't see me. Can anyone confirm that? Oh, I got it now. Thank you. Um, so, when getting involved in those efforts, you've got to see these things turn into metrics. I've got to see people move into more executive roles. I've got to not just see us hire people, but get them up to those next levels. And TD has a pretty good track record of that, but we still have a long ways to go, just like everyone else. Whether it's women in leadership positions or minorities, it doesn't matter. We have to work as one group and one group of people to make that agenda work. And so, for me, I could tell you a couple of personal stories about why D&I is so important to me and diversity and inclusion. I can share some of my thoughts on what we do from a Black Talent Pipeline initiative. And to me, it's all about giving back to the community. Whether or not we get some good recruits out of this, that's not the top of my radar. What's the top of my radar is that I can share my stories and I can get that feedback. And if we do get some good folks in who want to join the ride here with us, I think that's even all the better. That's the icing on the cake. But we believe in absolutely building a very inclusive environment where, to me, every employee and every customer is valued, respected, and supported. We have to be mirror images of what our company is and who we serve. And if we're not reflective of that environment, then I don't think we're doing our jobs. And that's why this has been so important to me. I want to share a quote with you that the head of our diversity and inclusion group made a couple years back, and it really resonates with me, because I think this is what is at the core of what we are at TD. And so if you bear with me, I'm going to read this verbatim. Respecting and honoring our differences is part of TD Bank's DNA, but we take it one step further. We believe it's important to embrace our shared experiences too. We've learned that diversity and inclusion enables each individual to achieve their full potential while helping us achieve our common mission of enriching the lives of our customers, colleagues, and communities. The first time I heard that was several years back, and it really stuck with me all these years later, because that is what it's all about, and it's what my focus will continue to be in this role. I look at it from the standpoint of, you have to look at diversity and inclusion as sort of different sort of things. Diversity referencing a variety of differences among us, whether it's race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, abilities, religion, whatever the case may be. But inclusion is understanding that each individual is unique and recognizing those differences. Inclusion is engaging those differences and creating a culture of belonging. And that's exactly what we need to do. For too long, many companies just weren't creating that environment. And to Jordan's point earlier on microaggressions, some people didn't think they were doing that, but it was clear. And unfortunately, you still see it in places today. And if Jordan could tell you some of the stories he heard that night from some of the folks and some of the leaders who were brave enough to get up there and talk about some of the things that they still sometimes see in their personal and work lives, and sometimes even with customers. It just amazes me to this day. But what I do see is a difference in standing up and having these conversations. And to me, there's no more important time than what we have right now. Like what's finally happening with this movement that I haven't seen in prior movements is the sustainability piece. And what do I mean by that? It's when the headlines dim, when the storylines start to grow a little bit quieter, when social media starts sort of slowing down. the agenda is still there. People are still talking about it, and that's important. We have to keep this dialogue going. We can't look for the media to tell this story for us. We all have a part to play in this, and that's the piece that I'm so passionate about. And I really do feel like this time around, hopefully things can begin to make a difference. I'm already seeing it. I see it with a lot of companies and what they've committed to do. I don't know if Jordan shared with you, I'm based in the U.S., and some of the U.S. banks that are our competitors here in the U.S. Have made some very, very hefty commitments on diversity and inclusion in their senior executive ranks. It's a good first step in the right direction. Long overdue, in my opinion, but it's certainly going to take us to that sort of next level of this conversation. Again, long after the media dies down. So a couple stories I want to share with you, and I shared these that night. When I look at what sort of drives me, I can tell you, where my background is from. I have a family who was a teacher. Seeing if my video is working here. I just blanked out for a second. Okay, I think we're good. Oh, nope, it just dipped out again. Bear with me one second here, guys. I'm going to restart the video. Hopefully I'm not freezing anymore here. Looks like I'm going okay. So anyway, my older sister, is a school teacher, and she teaches in a city called Camden, which is just outside of Philadelphia. It's in southern New Jersey, and she's been there for 30 plus years, and she teaches in the what is known as the most economically depressed city in the United States. These kids have really tough spots to get up out of, and the makeup of the town is mostly African American, and it's really something she's been passionate about her whole career. She could go to any school district that she wanted to, but she chose to stay there because she wanted to make a difference. And I remember having a conversation with her one holiday, and I just singing her praises. I said, you absolutely do miracle work. Like, if you can get through to that one kid every year, I think it's a start. And I said, I work at a bank. I'm an executive at a bank, and I don't feel like I'm changing the world. And she said, that's where you're wrong. She goes, I look at you. You're successful, but your success is because of your upbringing, your background. And I said, elaborate on that, because I'm not sure I'm following you. And what she was driving at was to say, she knows how passionate I am about this stuff, but she also knows that there's two parts to this equation. She views it her responsibility to do everything she can to get these kids an opportunity, to give them a chance and get them out into the workforce. And she says, at that point, I hand them off to you, and it's your responsibility to make sure that they get where they need to be. And I thought that was really powerful. I had never really looked at it that way. Maybe underlying, I sort of knew that was the equation there, but she made a real dent in sort of my view on things, and I really never forgot that. And I agree 100% with her. Like, she is absolutely killing herself to make sure that she can do everything she can to help these kids out. Then I think it is up to corporate America, corporate Canada, to take that next step and actually help these teachers move these kids to that next level. And I think it's just a wonderful opportunity. And she's my hero. She's dedicated her life to this. She spends probably a big chunk of her own money to make sure that she can do this. And there's no other person that I've seen quite as successful as her, and she's played a big part in my own development as well, especially when it comes to diversity and inclusion. But as I mentioned earlier, with my diversity path, I talked about my friend Luke, who had cerebral palsy, but I also one of my friends who I grew up with, African American fellow, and he and I always hung out in the same circles. But I grew up in a single parent home, a very meager background, and maybe that's part of where my understanding is. We had to scrap and claw for everything that we got, and I worked my way through university and was able to pick myself up and do well. But I think I had one thing that my friend Elliot, the African American guy, didn't have is the color of my skin. he came from a very affluent family. His father was a doctor. His mother was a lawyer. They did very well. But this is where I started learning about the differences and how he was treated versus how I was treated in different things. And it really, really resonated with me all those years. And I will never forget it. I actually just told him I was telling this story recently, and he was really honored for me to kind of talk to him about that. He himself is a doctor now as well. But when we were kids, you run around, you get in trouble, but the first person they'd look at is him. Oh, it couldn't possibly be the white kid. It must have been this kid. He's the bad seed. I'm like, what makes you think that? Like, I'm the kid that doesn't have anything in his pocket, not a penny to his name, and what makes you think automatically that it's him just because of his skin color? And it really rubbed me the wrong way. And to this day, I will never forget that. And I also know that it has helped me in my journey understand what folks go through. Just knowing that you can have all the privileges from a money standpoint, but because of the color of his skin, he didn't have the same privileges that I had because I was white, and that just never sat with me well. And it's been sort of a life's journey for me. It's something, as I said to you before, that I can't preach enough, and I took that with me to every job that I ever was in, and am doing so the same way I am here today with you guys. Keep the narrative going, keep the discussions going. I heard Jordan talk about the Black Lives Matter thing. If people can't say that, if people can't believe that, then in my book, they're flat out racists. Like there's a narrative there that's being built that people just don't get. I get really annoyed when I hear people say all lives matter. I shared with these guys an internet meme that had been going around. I'm sure most of you probably seen it, but and I'll read it to you because I have it on my phone here. Bear with me 1 second. I sent this to a lot of my friends, and it says, for my all lives matter friends, when the Boston Marathon was bombed and everybody's profile picture changed to Boston Strong, nobody said all cities strong. When the Las Vegas shooting happened, people changed their profiles to stand with Vegas. Nobody said stand with everyone. Have you ever seen someone counter a breast cancer patient with, wait, what about colon cancer? But for some reason, if someone says Black Lives Matter, it turns into an all-inclusive all lives matter. This is not an either-or proclamation. When there is a crisis, we have always rallied around that particular group, city, or cause. It does not diminish any other group, city, or cause. It just brings awareness and support to where it's needed. Nobody is saying all lives don't matter, but right now, our Black friends, families, colleagues, neighbors, and strangers need our support. When I saw that, it really, really hit home for me, because I think that definition really explains why that's so important and why we need to keep pushing that. So I think, it is really a lifelong journey. I'm hopeful that, this next generation, I have 3 kids of my own who are, actually my son's going into his last year of university, and I have twin girls who are going into their first year in September. And all 3 of them are very actively involved with these types of efforts and have been involved in the protests in the Philadelphia area. And I couldn't be prouder of them to carry on that tradition. They give me hope that, you guys in this next generation can finally move the needle where we still haven't been able to do that. So that was sort of my speech for you guys. I didn't want to make it all about, all TD Bank. I wanted to share with you some personal stuff. And what drives me. And again, it's not just about Black, it's about people with disabilities, LGBT, you name it. There's nothing more that I want to do is support all those types of D&I initiatives. The one, I left the group with this story that night, and I'll share it with you. It's more about the people with disabilities aspect of things. But if you remember my comment about my friend Luke, the kid with cerebral palsy. When we got to high school, I was playing baseball, and I went out for the baseball team, and Luke went with me, and I tried to coax him into going and getting involved. And he says, well, what can I do? Now Luke had this thing on his head where he could type into this thing and it would speak out. And I said, come on, just come with me and get involved. You've been, a close friend of mine for all these years. You stick by me with this. And so he did. and he ended up becoming the manager of our team. And I remember this one practice. I was going through these drills where we were doing these hook slides into second base, where you slide in and pop up and start running again. And I failed miserably at it. I wasn't the best athlete in the world, but I enjoyed playing baseball. Well, I go to slide, and I must have stopped, 3 feet in front of the second base bag. I got up all dejected. My coach is yelling at me. I run back to the bench, and there's Luke feverishly typing with his head on his thing there. And I said, "What?" And he holds it up, and in true self-deprecating style, he says, "I could have slid better than that." And that to me just summed up the relationship that I had with him and how he looked at things. He never viewed himself as somebody with a disability. He just looked at himself as somebody with a different ability. And I think that goes across the board. So just thought I'd share that funny little story with you. But, happy if you guys want to take any questions, or Nicholas or Jordan, anything else you want me to run through.
So one question that I was gonna ask you was, what do you think is the next steps like for a change? Like, what would you like to see change like right now within your environment?
Yep, for us, it absolutely has to be that continuation of the journey on making sure that we're not just hiring people, but that we're getting these people into senior levels in the organization. It's why we had those events. We're out there looking for folks that want to come join a very progressive organization, but we also have an opportunity and a mandate to make sure that we're getting people the right training, get people the right opportunities, get microaggressions out of the equation, get unconscious biases out of the equation. And honestly, that takes honest and sometimes difficult conversation at all ranks in our organization. And I'm a firm believer that you don't get good change unless you step out and feel a little uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Alexis, raise your hand. Do you have a question? If so, unmute and then ask.
Hi guys, so my name is Haley, Alexis McKella, and so I have a question for Jeff. So I wanted to ask a little bit about, as an executive, what power do you believe you have to make the change in terms of setting some metrics within the TD auditing space to actually drive some change? Because you did mention a lot of some really important points. You're doing great things in the TD community. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I also wanted to see what barriers that you possibly think you have that's stopping other executives or preventing other executives from making that level of metric change.
Totally agree. It's a great question, and we've self-imposed. Like I put a bit of an objective on for myself and my team to make sure that we're actually getting folks at the right levels. Generally we do very well when we're recruiting right out of university. First, second, third year level type folks. It's great, and if anything, that we've got a very, very reflective culture of the communities we serve, and it's very diverse, and that's fine. But what we have seen, we're no different than any other company. As you get higher up the ranks, those numbers don't match up, and you have to step back and ask yourself why. Why is that happening? Is it that we're still having a lot of those unconscious biases out there? Is it that we're not actually making it a priority? For me, one of the things that I did in the U.S. Many years ago, and I apologize, I don't know the Canadian school landscape that well, but in the U.S. you have historically black colleges and universities. And when we were doing recruiting, and we have a number of them right here in the Philadelphia area, when folks were going out and doing recruiting, they'd go to all the big name schools, the Villanovas, the Princetons, all those schools that are right around us. But I started raising the question of why not Lincoln University? Why not schools like that? Why are we not going after those students? And I think if we don't push ourselves to make that type of change, we're not going to get the people that we need to get into those ranks. The other part of it is just like I said before, those unconscious biases I think are the biggest hurdle that a lot of leaders have, is that They will never think of themselves as somebody who is biased, but their actions will tell you otherwise. And there's a lot of companies out there that see that. I'm very fortunate that I work for a company like TD that I think is really pushing that envelope and pushing those issues. And we're going to continue to do that. The metrics that I put on my team is to make sure that we're getting the right promos out there, that people are getting those opportunities, getting the right training, and going out of our way to make sure that everybody is given those same opportunities. Hopefully that gets to the point of what you were asking.
That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay,
You're welcome.
so it is 8 o'clock. So, Jeff, do you have about a couple more minutes if anyone has any more questions?
Yeah, I'm fine as long as you guys are.
Okay, so, but also I understand that some of you may have to leave right now. So feel free to exit from the meeting if you have to go. And if you have any more questions and you just want to stick around and chat, we'll just wait and see if anybody, yeah, so if you don't have any question, we'll just wait about a minute or so and then we'll see.
No problem. I apologize if the video was dumping on and off. I couldn't quite tell. Every now and then my screen would go blank.
For me, the screen was black the whole time, so I couldn't even see you. That's why, yeah, I guess the Wi-Fi is just, yeah, Wi-Fi is just not working today. But yeah, and okay, so no one has any question, but does anyone want to come forth and speak on any other experiences that they may have? You know, it doesn't have to necessarily be, you know, another Black person or something related to, you know, you've seen a microaggression take place, or it could even be from someone else from another ethnic background. I feel that, you know, that would really add to the conversation. Oh, Mustafa, okay. Yeah, Mustafa, you can ask your question.
Okay, hi, Jeff. I like the commitments that TD has made for to hire more Black people and everything like that. But I just wanted to know, besides the pipeline, what are like other initiatives that you guys are committed to increase diversity and like combat racism within the workplace? Because I can understand hiring people, but if you don't combat the actual racism that happens, say like with the manager or like the microaggression that happens in the workplace, like what are systems to help people, specifically like people who experience microaggressions, to come forward and actually like tell their story instead of just, you know, just keeping it to themselves and just keeping their head down and working?
Yeah, Mustafa, that's a fantastic question. It's something that we put a lot of emphasis on. So it's not just about the recruiting. It's not just about getting people on board. It's about making sure that our leaders are equipped to handle those types of things. That they know, you know, when they're being biased. They know what microaggressions are. So we actually have annual required training at all levels of the bank for those types of things on diversity and inclusion. We make it a point to make sure that our folks know, especially when they become people leaders. You know, as you move up the ranks and you become a people manager at a certain point, it really, you have to be equipped to understand that you know, you may be saying things that aren't appropriate and you don't even know it. And so it's a continuing journey, I think, for a lot of people. I think the fact that the bank is invested in a lot of these training efforts, we have a lot of really formalized training programs that continue that dialogue, particularly for our leaders, I think is just so important. It can't just be about the hiring. To me, the hiring part is the easiest part. The hardest part is unwinding years and years and years of that type of embedded culture that exists in a lot of organizations. But like I said, you know, I've worked for a couple of different banks in my career, and TD by far is the most progressive out of all of them. But I think you have to continue those dialogues. You have to have continued conversations on you know, understanding what these microaggressions are and understanding your own biases that you may not even know you have. And so it's not a one and done proposition. Keep the dialogue going, keep the training going, and you can begin to move the needle on some of that stuff.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, does anyone else have any other questions or comments that they would like to make? Yeah, we'll just give them about a minute or so.
I have a question for Jeff.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of companies have been kind of accused or put in the spotlight for just putting out like a company statement against, racist actions or, discrimination, police brutality, all of them. There's always been like, okay, you put out a company statement, but what's going on like within your doors of your company, how much do you think your company values their social presence in terms of like being within the rights of the movement, like if you guys decided to post something to do with Black Lives Matter, how are you making sure that you're backing up every statement that's being put out?
Yeah, it's a great point, and it's something that I think that we all know here at the bank is I like to call it we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk, and I like to shorten that up into my version of we walk the talk. Other orgs that I've worked for over the years do exactly that. They'll say, oh, let's use this moment in time, whatever it may be, and I'll go all the way back to the Rodney King stuff back in '90. You'll have to forgive me on the dates, 92, 94, somewhere back in that time frame. I was a young guy right out of school, and I saw people hijack that moment and sort of put it out there as, oh, we're supportive of this, but did nothing behind the scenes for it. What I've seen now is the leaders in our organization, the senior executives in this organization, putting their own skin on the line with this and actually forcing everyone to make sure that this is front and center. To hear these folks just even utter the phrase Black Lives Matter is so important. But you're right. It can't just be about let's take this opportunity now because we're trying to sell things or we're trying to do things. The culture in this organization is such that they want to move the needle in the right direction to make sure that we are supportive of the folks that we're serving in our customer base, as well as our own employees. We're a firm believer in taking care of your employees first, and the customer will follow along. And it's an absolute true statement. So for us, to me, we can't let these just be words on an intranet site. We can't let these be just a passing fad. These have to be actionable daily steps for all of us to adhere to, and that's the one thing where I see TD doing a great job is making that front and center for everything. It's not just putting stuff out on an Instagram post or anything like that. It's about making change and making the right sort of moves in the organization.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, does anyone else have any questions or comments that they would like to add? No worries, Tony. Thanks for coming. All right, so it looks like no one has any other comments or questions. So, Jeff, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your week and out of your day to just come and have this chat. Oh, Celine, okay. Yeah, Celine, you want to turn on your camera?
Yeah, it's on.
And, yeah. All right, take it away.
Once again, Jordan, thank you for a great presentation, and same with you, Jeff. You brought out amazing insights and really take into account and consider within our daily lives. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jordan and also yourself mentioning all these stories, I couldn't help bring up my experience. Just to have some little insights about me, my mom is a Caucasian and my dad is Indian. I got growing up. It was me and my brother. We grew up in more of a Caucasian area. There wasn't so much of that Indian side. And growing up and going to school, especially when my brother started coming to school with me, nobody believed that he was, because we didn't have the same skin tone. I am a little bit lighter than he is, and for the longest time, people were like, "Oh, like, is one of you like, are you adopted? Like, I swear you don't even look like your brother." So just remarks like that really did my brother, and it really didn't allow me to open up into my races and my like that I wanted to be more passionate about growing up. But hearing those remarks and hearing those things, it really does take a toll on you. And hearing Jordan's stories, I totally understand where it's coming from, because those comments can really change you and really make you realize, do I even embrace my culture? Like, how do I embrace it when I'm hearing these comments? And over the years, and after so much realization, I actually embrace my culture more than ever, because diversity is where it's at. Honestly, people are too similar, and it's boring. And the older I get, the more it makes me realize, you know what? It's either you become wiser and you grow to have a more diverse society, or you stay the same and you have that same mentality that if your brother is not the same color as you are, you guys are not siblings. Like, just things like that, people have to really take into account and think about what they say to somebody, because that's someone who you're affecting. You want to help people for the better good and not for the worse.
Exactly. And
So,
sorry, you can go,
go
Jeff.
ahead. No, Celine's spot on, and I don't want to steal your thunder here, Jordan, but like, that's exactly what this world needs. We just need differences, because differences are going to make us better. If everybody's the same, we're not gonna get ahead in this world. And I couldn't echo your comments even more. Like I said, I have a multicultural family, and I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. But again, I hear you. Like, I know some of those things that are said. My brother's daughter is half African American, and I'm amazed at this in this day and age, where we could go and walking around and you could see people looking like, why is she with that white guy? And it bothers me to no end, and the comments that are made. So I think the more that we can create that diversity and inclusion narrative, the better we're going to be in the long run. So sorry, Jordan, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh yeah, no, I was essentially going to say about the same thing. And just thank you, Celine, for sharing that story, because I find that when everyone kind of takes the time to talk about it, then we all kind of realize that, in a way, like, especially with microaggressions, like, we all have faced them, and when we talk about them as a whole, and not just Black people talking about it, or in your case being half Indian, and then, like, like, if everyone just took the time to kind of share their own experiences, then we would all be able to step out of our own world and kind of see that, hey, just in general, there's a problem across the board that we all need to tackle together. And once we all open up and we had that discussion, then from there on, we can start to make change. But we have to understand each other first. And to add to that, in grade 12, I believe, there was a diversity survey thing. I forgot exactly what it was called, but essentially it was like a survey meant for I guess POCs in the school. And thank you, Megan. It was a mix of us in a room, and we essentially had to fill out a survey, basically, like, tell it like it is, and just to kind of I guess describe what our experience is like within our own school, and then within the school board and so forth. And it wasn't just all Black people, or it wasn't just one race. It was a mix of us. And then at the end of it, we were asked to kind of share some experiences. And then I found that when we all kind of said our own piece, then I realized that, hey, like, we're all kind of dealing with something in some sort of shape or form. And when we all talked about it, then it made me more aware of it, because now we're all we're all essentially talking about this together, and now we all kind of understand each other, and we're able to relate and use these experiences as I guess you could say like reminders of not to do that. Or it's like a bit of a reality check to kind of remind us that, hey, like, some of the things that you could be saying could come off as a micro assault to someone, and vice versa. So it was kind of like a good reality check. So thank you for being brave and coming on and sharing that experience, because I really find that hearing stories from other backgrounds, because obviously not everyone here is one race, it really adds to the discussion. So once again, thank you. And Jeff, as I was saying, I'd like to thank you for just being very transparent, because I find that even the first time when I met you at the TD Black Talent Pipeline Initiative event, I found that you were very transparent, and that, as a white man, you did not have to do that, but you did. And in doing that, I was able to see that you showed so much empathy, and I was able to see how genuine you were. And that's why that will always stick with me, and I'll never forget that. And that's why the first thing I did when I got the chance was go up to you directly to talk to you about it, and to kind of dig deeper and hear more, because I was really touched by that. And it was one of the first times in real life, in my life, that I actually seen someone of another race, and more specifically a white man, take that much accountability and show that much passion in wanting to show and wanting to change things. So I wanted to say thank you for that, and thank you for keeping in touch as well and coming out. And yeah, that's it. So
Well, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity, and more importantly, thank you for everything you do. Like, you guys, you're the hope of the future. When I think of your generation and you folks in school, I really am encouraged by where the world's going, because I really think you're going to keep making a difference. Don't let the narrative die. Keep this momentum going.
yeah, thank you. All right, and I also want to say thank you to Nick for reaching out to me and helping me plan this out, and just having that phone call discussion, because it went on for about an hour or so, but I found that it was really necessary in giving you guys this discussion. And as well as Eric, Catherine, and Sarah, and Gaia, and Helen, I want to thank all of you guys for helping me with, whether it be putting together the graphics or putting together the description. Everyone all played their part, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And a special thank you to Celine at the end for saving it, and not making it so dry. And yeah, so I hope everyone has a good day, or a good night, I should say, and stay tuned for the next installment, or next series, part 2. All right, take care.
Great. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Thank you, Grace. All right. Take care.